Hello and welcome back for another installment in our Courtroom Confidential Conversation series. For this episode, please join me in welcoming Gavin Fish. Hello, my friend. How are you?
I am well, thank you. Glad to be here.
Oh, good. I'm so glad that you were able to take some time to talk with us. And I know you are an extremely busy fella, because not only are you running this very successful YouTube channel, which we're going to get into and talk about, but you are one of that rare breed that includes myself as well, that still has a day job, still
Indeed, I
working,
do.
still keeping the lights on somehow. Let's start there. Tell us a little bit about what it is that you're actually that's still paying the bills and the day job for you.
Yeah, I live in Western Pennsylvania. I'm nearly on the Ohio border, just very Western Pennsylvania. I live in a rural county, and I work as a local news reporter for a company called EYT Media. We cover 3 counties. They're all rural here in Western Pennsylvania. It's Clarion, Jefferson, and Venango counties. I grew up in Sacramento, California, so
Oh,
like my neighborhood had more people in it than these 3 counties. It's just a very, very small, very sparsely populated area, and I cover everything. Like I was just up at a high school covering a little press conference in the high school library, and sometimes I'm covering murder scenes. It's just
that is
everything.
fantastic. You're like, it's when you started describing that, it's almost like the old school local doctor who would just you got a tummy ache, the doctor shows up. You've got a broken arm,
Yeah,
the doctor shows up. There's no specialist. This guy handles everything. You're kind of that in the journalism world.
that's very much the way it is out here. We've got 6 or 7 of us that work for a couple of different outlets. My outlet doesn't print anything, but there's still newspapers out here, like local newspapers, and it's the same crew. We all show up at the same
I
same
love it.
things, and it's really I love it. We chose to be out here,
Yeah.
and I love the small town feel of it.
I want to talk to you more about that and what that's like being a journalist in a small community like that. But before you mentioned you're from Sacramento. What motivated you? What brought you out to kind of this rural part of Pennsylvania?
Well, my wife and I, what really happened was I one day had to write a check to the franchise tax board there in California, and I was like, "Why?
That'll do it.
We're only here because we were raised here,
Right.
right?" And it we came up with this idea to kind of go on a little family adventure. We had friends that had spent a couple years in Spain, and they called it a radical sabbatical, and we were like, "That sounds fun," but our kids weren't really keen on leaving the country. My wife really wasn't keen on leaving the country, and so we just decided to go east of the Mississippi. Spent a couple years figuring out where we wanted to go, and we landed here in Western PA.
Wow. How old were the kids at that time?
Our oldest at the time, I guess she started her junior year in high
Oh,
school,
wow.
and then our youngest at the time was 2. She was a little toddler.
Wow. So you literally packed everybody up in what, like an RV or something, and just said, let's kind of see this part of the country?
No, we were more. Kimberly and I'm a data-driven guy.
Yeah.
Like my background really isn't journalism. My background is in software engineering and web development, stuff like that. So I'm a data analyst. So I'm very driven to analyze things. And we spent about 2 years trying to figure out what was important to us, and did the research on the different kind of facets of what was important in our lives and which states fit that, which ones didn't. We had 26 different dimensions that we were looking at. And then once we narrowed it down to a few places, then we just started flying places and experiencing the area. Then we landed on Western PA, and we packed up. We had 2 SUVs pulling 2 U-Haul trailers. We sold or gave away most of our life, and we brought just a few things, and we came out here, bought a house.
I love that. First of all, I love it, and I applaud the spirit of adventure that had for you guys to decide to go ahead and do that. But then I also love the very purposeful way you went about it. You're not just like throwing darts at a map or
Right.
saying, Charlottesville sounds really nice. Maybe we go live there, but like you really thought what is important to us. Did it turn out to be a good choice? I mean, you're there now, but did you
Yeah,
feel like, oh, this was what we were looking for?
it mostly is. There's no such thing as the perfect place on earth, right? It mostly is. We don't regret our decision. I'll tell you now, though, we have 5 children, and there's a 10-year gap between number 3 and number 4.
Yoish.
So numbers 4 and 5 were really little when we came here,
Yeah.
and they are now. I mean, it was never an adventure for them,
Right.
and so we're now starting to think, what's our next adventure? And we're starting to think maybe we'll go to Europe like our friends did for a
Wow,
couple
I
years.
love it. I will keep us looped in. We would love to
Pretty fun.
join you for
It'll
that.
end up being like a 3-year process,
Yeah.
right? We'll have to do
The
everything. In
research,
fact,
yeah.
in June, Kimberly and I are headed to Portugal just to check out
Love it.
Porto and
Fantastic.
checking that out.
Love that. No, you're absolutely right. California is a wonderful place. I grew up here as well. I feel like there's definitely this battle against inertia when you're living somewhere and grew up there, the idea of ever leaving. And my wife talk about it, and I talk about it all the time though. Well, could we move? Would we move? And one of the things that always cracks me up is when you live in California, especially on the coast, one of the reasons that gets brought up is, well, how could you move away from the ocean? Like, really, do we want to live away
Mm,
from the ocean? And then I always turn to my wife and go, when is the last time we went to the beach? Honestly, how
exactly.
many
Yeah.
summers ago was it that we actually went to the beach?
Yeah.
Yes, it's nice to see it. Yes, it's nice to know it's there. It's beautiful. I'm not trying to take anything away from that, but it's like, it really is not this huge part of our lives that we couldn't replicate that same sort of beauty somewhere else in the country.
No, honestly, Kimberly and I go to the California beach as often now
Yeah,
as we did when we were living in Northern
probably
California.
more so because you're planning to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, we go out and I mean, and we love going back. Both of our parents still live there. We have siblings that are all there. We were just back in Santa Cruz over the summer for my in-laws' 50th anniversary celebration, right? It was great.
yeah,
Feels great, but
yeah,
it also feels great to come home
yeah.
here to Pennsylvania.
Well, very cool. I love that. I'm going to tell my wife about this, and maybe that'll get the juices flowing again for us. But okay, so you say you have a background in data, not so much in journalism. Then let's talk about what
Yeah.
brought you to the world of journalism.
Well, YouTube brought me to the world of journalism.
Okay.
What happened was when we moved, I had I was working as a consultant to high-end audio companies. I had kind of worked my way up inside high-end audio as an executive, and left my company because I just had kind of gotten bored of the company and was consulting with high-end audio companies, and it became very easy to say, let's pick up and move because my clients were in Denver and Hong Kong and, Munich and
Right.
just all over the place. It didn't matter where we lived. But when COVID hit, the high end audio industry got hit extremely hard. Most of my clients, all but one, lost their businesses,
Wow.
which meant I had no income. And I mean, it also meant they had no income, right? A lot of people were really suffering because of the economic, uh, I guess, side effects of shutting down the world.
Yeah.
And so that's when I started YouTube. I did it with a friend of mine. We thought we would be smart enough to be able to make it be successful right out of the gate.
Right.
It didn't really happen.
Right.
And then once I had some sort of success on YouTube and became pretty well known in and around my area, uh, that's when I started talking to who's now my boss at my day job, to write for them.
That's interesting and unexpected for me because I thought you were going to tell me that you started into journalism and then that led to the YouTube, but the YouTube came first. So this is not usually
Yeah,
the journey that we hear about. But let's talk about that. What a lot of people point to COVID as being the starting point and the impetus for
yeah.
them to get involved in YouTube. And it makes sense. We're all stuck at home. Well, I still got a laptop. I still got a camera. There's still the internet. But what was your vision of what you were going to bring to YouTube, or what did you expect your content to be? You said you started with a buddy. So what was the original
Yeah.
concept?
My friend Rick and I were, I mean, the same thing had happened to him, but his clientele were all restaurateurs, right? So, like with all the restaurants
Oh my
closing in
God.
California
Yeah.
specifically, he had no business anymore, and he was a true crime fan.
Okay.
And he's like, why don't we do a true crime channel where we actually try to help solve crimes? I went, I mean, that's as good an idea as anything else I've heard or come up with.
Sure.
So I remember a conversation with Rick where I asked him, "Do you think there are enough cases where we could be able to work on enough cases?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, there will be plenty. Let's just do some research. You pick one, I'll pick one." And he picked one from Sacramento, California, from 1970, a cold case.
Yeah.
And oh my goodness, I got hooked. I loved it. Just diving into that case. We ended up finding evidence that hadn't been even known to the cold case investigators. We found a witness who, I mean, he was like 9 years old when he witnessed this woman's abduction, and he had never told anyone. And
Oh
now,
my God.
almost 60 years old, he reached out to us. We connected him with police. It was a blast.
What was the name of
Uh,
that
uh,
case? Because now you got me
her
hooked.
name,
Yeah.
yeah, her name is Judith Ann Hawkery,
Okay.
and she was a nurse in Sacramento, California, who she worked the late shift. What was crazy about this case is that she lived in the like my oldest sister, when she first got married, her first apartment complex, that was the complex that she lived in the 1970s, right? So it was like,
Wow.
"Ooh, we've got this little family connection."
Right.
And then when I looked at pictures of her, she had that late 1960s beehive kind of hairdo, and it looked just like my mom. So I started to get connected a
Yeah.
little bit with. She lived in the place that my sister lived in. She kind of looks like my mom. It turns out that her engagement ring was almost exactly my mom's, wedding ring.
Bizarre.
There
Yeah.
was just like these connections, and,
Sure.
and you get connected with these people. But yeah, she was working the late shift at Sutter Memorial in Sacramento, and was planning on having a late dinner with her fiance, and by late, like midnight. And by 1 o'clock in the morning, when she didn't show up, he went out into the parking lot and found her car there with the doors open and signs of a struggle.
Oh my God. And
And
what
she was found
what year was
a few
this?
days later. 1970.
Wow. Wow.
She was found in a shallow grave up in Weimar, California, up in the Sierras a few days later. It was, and it's cold. It's still
Oh, I
unsolved.
was just gonna say, I didn't want to spoil it if you want to push people towards your coverage of it, but it's still an unsolved case. Wow.
Still an unsolved case, yeah. But for a guy who doesn't like true crime, dude, I was
Oh, well,
in
you just gave me
fast.
a paragraph's worth of an intro, and I'm already into it. I mean, it's just those kind of
Yep.
vanished out of nowhere things that are just fascinating. Because
Yeah.
I think it strikes at that primeval caveman type fear that we all have of just living a normal life, doing everything the right way, and tragedy, nightmare can strike on anyone. That's the kind of stuff that, at least to me, draws me in.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the way it's been with all the cases that I've done really deep dives on. There is some connection where it reminds me of, the Ellen Greenberg case is one that
Yeah.
I'm really connected to, right?
Yeah.
Ellen was born in 1980. I was born in 1975, but she died when she was 27 years old. So while we are technically the same age, she's forever 27.
Yeah.
She was about to get married, and
Yeah.
at the time my daughter was engaged in her early 20s, and I just kind of felt that
Connection.
paternal
Yeah.
connection,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. No, I totally
couldn't let it
understand.
go.
And I do want to talk about that case quite a bit, because the work that you've done on that case has been tremendous, and the attention that you have brought to that case has been amazing. But tell me a little bit, how does a restaurateur and a data guy, I understand the fascination with true crime, but you're saying you're uncovering evidence, you are finding witnesses. How are you doing that from your laptops, or are you actually going out boots on the ground type of stuff? What what was your process for the investigation part?
Yeah, so Rick and I actually after about a year, Rick and I parted ways. He still does his thing, and we decided to do it separately. Um, but the way he and I teamed up is he was very good at producing
Mhm.
the content, and I was kind of a guy that was really, really good at digging into the data. So when I would find a document, for example, the second case that we looked at, her name was Carol Beth Hilburn, and we found an 8-page coroner's report from 1971, I think it was, in Sacramento. And there was this whole idea that it might be connected to the Zodiac, and
Oh,
it was
wow.
very
Yeah.
exciting. But nobody had ever publicly like got their hands on that. And so, you know, basically it's just full of data. It's an old mimeograph looking document chock full of data, right? That the coroner put on there. So my job was kind of a troubleshooting job, like troubleshooting software. If you're developing software, you go line by line,
Yeah.
try to find issues, right? And so I would I to this day I organize my case files like I would a software project. And that's how I troubleshoot. And like in that case, what ended up happening is we found out that she had had a baby, and there was no record of like her leaving a child or anything like that. And we ended up finding a woman that was then by then a grown woman, mother and grandmother herself, that was the daughter that the victim adopted out.
Wow.
So through her we were able to find out all the adoption papers, and we were able to make other connections into the case. It just, I don't know, when you put content out there and people see it, they started to reach out to us and tell us
Interesting. So
tell us stuff.
so
Yeah.
your exposure to some of these cases have led to results too, just people for the first time seeing anyone showing interest in it, and they all of a sudden start giving you leads?
Yeah, so as we're publishing, like take Carol Hilburn, as we're publishing her story, then somebody sees it. It's some place in the world, and we're not talking like we were getting 8 and 900 views a video. It's not like
Right.
we were getting huge
Right.
like results or anything. But an old friend reached out of her, was like, yeah, the police never talked to me about this, but I was her roommate, and yeah, Carol liked speed. That was one of the things that, like, wait a minute, what? Right. And then we were able to, we ended up on that case giving the police a um, like a suspect.
Wow.
Like, we felt like we had triangulated a good suspect based on, we knew that Carol was doing drugs. It was the 70s. She was working in a biker bar that was known to be a Hell's Angel spot where they dealt drugs.
Right.
I mean, I don't know if anything will ever come of that, but we felt like we found a really good suspect.
Well, listen, it sounds like they didn't have much they were working on anyways. If it's this many years cold, any kind of lead might be
Yeah.
helpful. That brings up an interesting point. What has been the response from law enforcement when these internet YouTube sleuths all of a sudden start, bringing them information? I'm curious because that has become kind of a phenomenon where people
Yeah.
uh, are becoming more proactively involved and helpful sometimes. But I'm always curious because law enforcement is, in my experience, has a healthy skepticism of outside people and bringing their help in, and everybody's kind of initially confronted with a raised eyebrow, like, okay, what is this guy and why is he bothering me? What has been your experience?
Yeah. Well, first off, that skepticism is exactly the kind of personality trait that you want in a police officer. So
Sure.
it's natural for them to be that way. Right. But in those two cases, in the Judy Hockery case and the Carol Beth Hilburn case, that one was in the same cold case unit in Sacramento, California. And there is pretty famous investigator. Her name is Mickey Lynx. She is one of the very important crew that brought down Joseph D'Angelo.
Mm.
And man, she was great. And then she would never share anything with us, but she
Right.
was always happy to absorb whatever it is that we found.
Wow.
And she was responsive. And there's a case out here in Pennsylvania. Uh, we just call it the Penny Doe case. There's a Jane Doe case. Her skeletal remains were found in the 90s. And I was able to track down where her bones had been in a box at a university since like 1996. And
And that was unknown to law enforcement?
it was unknown to law enforcement.
My God.
So what I did was, and what's really funny is in a lot of places, there's just no really good organization, especially when they're passing from one generation to the next. So I I knew who the coroner was. Again, a small town, small area. I knew who the coroner was in the 90s. He, when I called him, he was like a funeral home director, part-time coroner. Yeah, I remember that case. I'm like, well, do you have a report on it? Maybe up in my attic somewhere. Well, can I come take a look? No, I really don't want you going through my attic. But I seem to remember sending her remains off to Mercyhurst University. You should check with Dr. Dirkmott. Right. And it was just those kinds of conversations.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, I reached out to the guy. He's like, oh yeah, I've got her remains. And I got up there. He laid them out full on like, no, what's the name of that show with the, it's called Bones, right? It was
Uh-huh.
full on like Bones. It was like on a table. There's this 30-year-old,
Wow.
skeletal remains. And then we got Dr. Dirkmott to send the new coroner a sample of her femur. And sure enough, there's DNA there that they can do genetic genealogy on. Still hasn't happened yet,
Right.
but it's going.
Wow. Incredible. In doing this, I mean, this is blowing me away because you're finding stuff that the police never found. You don't have the same types of resources, I imagine, that they do, or access that they do,
Well,
but
that is true.
you're just kind of bulldoggedly doing it. Do you find that the reason why you're able to find things that law enforcement hasn't found is because of a lack of interest in law enforcement or a lack of organization? Or is it just that they maybe don't have the time to concentrate on one case as kind of laser focus as you've been able to?
Yeah, I think it's mostly that.
Yeah.
The resource deficit that they have. Now, in that Penny Doe case, I couldn't get the state police to pick up a phone call so I could tell them, hey, get this bone fragment
Yeah.
and test it. I couldn't get anybody to pick up the phone there because I'm like a crazy
Right.
YouTuber,
Right.
just calling them up. So I was at my day job. I was covering a murder trial in that county, and I had one of the state troopers that was testifying at that murder trial happened to be the cold case detective on the Penny Doe case. And so I just went up to her. I was like, hey, trooper,
Glad to
introduced
meet you.
myself, and I told her all about it. And she's like, really? No way. Yes. And then she followed up.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
So, yeah, I mean, sometimes it just takes that. There has to be somebody with a bulldog approach.
Maybe it's just the laying eyes on someone too, and realizing you're not wearing a tinfoil foil hat
Right.
somewhere in a dark room, but that you're a reporter yourself and you just happen to do some digging. That's incredible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's talk about, though, one of the cases, and I'm curious how you get. It sounds like some of these are your ideas. I'm curious if some of them are ideas that have been brought to you by followers and subscribers of saying, can you look into this? But talk to us in particular, one case that many people talk about, and you have become kind of the go-to expert on it, is the Ellen Greenberg case. And you mentioned that before,
Yeah.
but fill us in for people who don't know about it, what it is about it, why it's fascinating, how you got exposed to it, and where things stand now.
Yeah. So the only case that I've ever actually sought out was Judy Hockery, our first case with Rick. Ever since then, they just come to me.
Wow.
People bring them to me. And that is the case with Ellen Greenberg. So I guess the provenance of that is I'm working on Judy Hockery and Carol Beth Hilburn, and a viewer said, Gavin, you really should look at this case in Buffalo, New York. Her name is Amanda Winkowski. Okay, I'll check that out. Got in touch with the family, started looking at that. And then while I was investigating Amanda, somebody said, if you think Amanda's crazy, you should check out Ellen Greenberg.
Mm-hmm.
So it just kind of went like that. And Ellen's case came to me like that. Somebody said, check out Ellen Greenberg. Pennsylvania is a terrible state when it comes to open records.
Okay.
It's maybe the worst in the nation.
Really?
The right to know law is terrible. So it's really tough to get stuff in Pennsylvania. But it so happened that Ellen's parents had filed a civil lawsuit, and there were exhibits that were investigative files in the lawsuit. And so I purchased every document on the lawsuit. And I really shouldn't have done that. I could not afford that. It was almost $1,000 that I spent
Okay.
on that. But then I turned on my software hat, went through every single page. It was 800 or 900 pages. I think it was 800 or 900 pages of exhibits. I think everything that I went through is probably a couple thousand pages.
Wow.
And I I had maybe a little too much chutzpah and not understanding the ethical ramifications of it. I published the investigative files on my website.
Okay.
I figured they're public records. I will publish them publicly.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I've learned since then, not a good idea, Gavin, without permission of the family, but it did turn out that the Greenbergs loved it.
Okay.
They loved that I had done that. And they had been working hard to get attention on their daughter's case for 10 years at that time. And finally, somebody and I didn't have much of an audience, maybe 10 or 12,000 followers at that point. But I was taking a look at it. And yeah, that's how I got involved with Ellen.
Tell us about the case, though. Why is it a case that should fascinate people? I know clearly why I'm fascinated with it, but I'm curious what kind of switched the light on for you, and just give us a brief understanding of what it's about.
Sure. Well, the reason that I am drawn to it is the same reason the very first case where I was drawn to a case like this was Amanda Winkowski. In Amanda's case, she disappears. Her body shows up a month later, fully naked, upside down, frozen solid in a trash can in the winter in Buffalo, New York. And there were signs that she had been strangled, all sorts of things, but the medical examiner called her death an accidental overdose, though there were no metabolites of any drugs in her system.
Wow.
It was crazy.
Wow.
So that kind of acrimony, that kind of possible corruption, really, I'm drawn to that stuff.
Yeah.
In Ellen's case, Ellen was stabbed to death. She was stabbed 20 times in the front of her chest and torso and to the back of her head and neck. One of those stab wounds to the back of her neck appears to have been made post-mortem.
Incredible.
And the medical examiner, after being pressured by police and the DA's office in what the Greenbergs called a clandestine meeting, like a secret meeting, the medical examiner said she had done it to herself. That pissed me off.
There's graphics about this case, and we're going to show those in the final edit of this, that you look at them, and I'm no forensic pathologist. You're no forensic pathologist, but we are human beings that walk the earth. And you look at it and you go, there is no way you can convince me someone did something like this to themselves. And just even you describing it in the simplest of terms, you say to yourself, no possible way. And again, I don't want to make this entire interview about the Ellen Greenberg case, but it is so fascinating. Have you ever explored the idea that strange things do happen? people do take their lives in bizarre ways. Is
Mhm.
it entirely outside of the realm of possibility this could have happened? I guess not. Have you looked down those kind of pathways of maybe, perhaps, or is it
100%.
okay? Tell us about that.
Yeah. So Ellen's case, there were a lot of things going on in Ellen's life at the time
Yeah.
that I uncovered over the course of like 3 years, right? Uh, one of the things that definitely did happen is that she visited a Wikipedia page about suicide. She had done that.
Hmm.
Another thing that was happening is Ellen never met a sleeve that she loved. She was a spaghetti strap, sleeveless, tank top kind of girl,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
But as we look at her personal life in the last 2 months of her life, she's turtleneck and long sleeve girl. And it
Interesting.
turns out that she has like 59 bruises on her body when she was, look, when pictures were taken of her at the morgue. And so there was a lot going on, right? I think there was some domestic violence happening there.
Hmm.
I think that she was stressed out. School was stressed out and everything. She was stressed out about her students, and she was stressed out about her job. She had told people that she had asked her parents if she could please come home without her fiance that she had been living with. She asked another family member if she could please stay with her, and everybody, I mean, out of the goodness they wanted to protect her, they were giving her advice like see a psychiatrist,
Yeah.
they're trying to help her. So there's all this stuff going on in her life. So it's possible that somebody with all those things going on in their life might decide to end their own life. Sure. But I keep going back to that she was stabbed in the back of her head and neck, and one of them was after she was already dead.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
No, I mean, believe me, it doesn't take a lot of convincing to say that that's just not. It maybe lives in the world of possibilities, but certainly not the world of probabilities.
sure.
Um,
Yeah.
I agree with you, but it is it is something I think that's important to explore in a case like this, because whenever someone makes this tragic decision to take their life, it is most family members say there's no way they would have done this. I can't believe that somebody would like this, and I think it's just part of our natural um, belief that we just don't want to feel that a loved one of ours would ever be pushed to that. And I personally have been hired by families before to investigate situations where they felt like this is not right. They're saying this was my son took his life. I need you to look at this because it's not true. And every avenue you look down, you find that it
Yeah.
is in fact true, and they just can't wrap their heads around it. I'm not saying that's at all what's taking place here, but I think it is important to explore that, which it sounds like has been done.
Yes.
And yet still we're left with this remarkable set of circumstances. And I know you're only giving us the very little tidbits about all the circumstances surrounding it that all seem to point towards um, someone else having a hand in the taking of her life. Now, that was
Yeah.
how many years ago?
That was 2011. It's
So
been 14 years
14 years this family has been living and trying to fight against that. Update us.
in a state
Right.
that is designed to not let that happen.
Right.
Pennsylvania I mean, they spent almost, well, I don't want to round it up too high. They said around $800,000. So the majority, almost $1 million, fighting the state of Pennsylvania, the city of Philadelphia, just to get them to say she didn't do this to herself.
Right.
It is either undetermined or homicide,
Right.
which is the obvious thing.
Right. Just we're not even saying go put somebody in handcuffs. We're just saying
They've never
un-
said that. Yeah.
undo this ridiculous conclusion. Tell us where things stand now, because after all of that time and the hard work that they've done and the work that you've put into it too, where do things stand now? Because there's been some developments in this case.
Yeah, I was actually in court with them just a few weeks ago. So what has happened? There were three things happening in the Ellen Greenberg case. There were two lawsuits, and then the case is in Chester County. So what was happening is they were suing the medical examiner and a couple of police officers claiming that they had conspired to cover up the murder of their daughter. But all they wanted from it was for the city of Philadelphia to go, "You're right, she didn't do this to herself." They didn't want anything other than that. But they filed that lawsuit, and at the 11th hour, like jury duty or jury selection was starting on Monday morning. On Saturday night, the medical examiner signs a piece of paper that says, "You're right, she didn't do this to herself."
Incredible.
And then we get there Monday morning for jury selection. And of course, the city negotiates real fast and they came to a settlement. Part of that settlement was that the new medical examiner in Philadelphia would take a look at the case for the first time in 14 years.
Incredible.
But all they really cared about was that Dr. Marlon Osborne, the original pathologist, would say to the world, their daughter did not do it
No.
to herself.
Here's another thing about this case. Many things about this case are fascinating to me, but I don't understand the tremendous pushback against saying that this was not a case of somebody taking their own life. That's the part that always confuses me is
Yeah.
what political forces, what motivations are at play here that would possibly make them take this case and give a bunch of pushback on it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there are a couple of different facets to this. Number one, I don't think that the police from the beginning engaged in a conspiracy to cover up a murder.
Right.
I think they were just incompetent that day.
Gotcha.
Not incompetent in general.
Right.
It was a bad day. There was this storm coming in. The city was shut down. It was when she died, it was in an area that hadn't seen a homicide in 2 decades.
Gotcha.
It was just, and when they got there and they looked at a scene that didn't really look all that bloody or slashery, right?
Mm-hmm.
They see her laying on the ground. They lift up her shirt and they see a couple of what look like hesitation wounds. They go, "Okay, she did this to herself. Can we wrap this up?" And it wasn't until the next day that Dr. Osborne did the examination and said, "Did y'all see all this on the back of her?
Right.
This is a homicide, right?"
Right.
That is when the conspiracy started. They were just covering their own hind end at that point.
You think that's what it was? It was just they didn't want to look like they had dropped the ball so badly to begin with?
I think in the beginning, that's the way it was. Now, political forces came later because the person who I think would be the number one suspect, a guy named Sam Goldberg, he was Ellen's fiance. He was the only person, according to him, in the room with her before she died. He is connected to he comes from a well-to-do family on Philadelphia's main line. It's a very kind of hoity-toity, swanky place. And at the time, eventually the case was kicked to the Attorney General's office. That Attorney General at the time was Josh Shapiro, who is now our governor. And Josh Shapiro has connections to that family. Like, he calls them friends. So there was a conflict of interest. Now, I brought that up on my YouTube channel, and a few days later, quietly, Josh Shapiro kicked the case out of his office. He did not admit to a conflict of interest. He said there was an appearance of a conflict of interest, but nevertheless, he had kept that case for 4 years, telling the family Ellen did it to herself, Ellen did it to herself, Ellen did it to herself for 4 years. And he was friends with the family of who should be police's number one suspect. So that politicking appeared later on, like 9 or 10 years later.
Wow. Well, listen, like I said, I feel like I could do several episodes just talking to you about this one case. You've done several episodes yourself just talking about this one case. I don't want to take more time. And if people are interested, please check out Gavin's channel if you want excellent, thorough coverage on this case. But let's get back into more the story of you a little bit. At what point, now that you're doing the YouTube thing and it's starting to take off and you're finding you have a passion for all of this, you said then the journalism idea came into your life. I want to hear about
Yeah.
that. How did that chapter start?
Well, I was writing all my scripts. I do live streams almost exclusively now,
Mhm.
but at the time I was doing one video a week. I was working all week on the video, writing the script, editing it, making a presentation. And I had gotten pretty good at writing a story. And so I thought, I wonder if EYT or the Derek or whatever would be interested in hiring me because I'm not making a living here on YouTube.
Mhm.
And so I reached out to both. There are two publications in the area. I reached out to both. I told them kind of what my vision was, that I would be the crime guy, and I would do deep dives into crimes, either historical or current, that are happening in our area. And one of them took me up on it.
I love it.
And so, yeah, I mean, I've been doing that now. I think I just finished my third year now. Now that I say that out loud, it's been about 3 years, I think.
Congratulations. Fantastic. Tell us,
Yeah,
is that something that you have discovered as a passion later on, that like, hey, this is something I like doing as a
it's a
journalist? Yeah.
blast. Yeah, it's a blast.
Tell us what it's like though in a small community where you're at, where you are kind of that community's lifeline to local news.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not the only guy, but in the three counties that we cover, there's probably half a dozen or a dozen of us that report on different things. And by reporting on different things, I literally mean like the ribbon cutting at the local antique mall that is opening up, or the Christmas tree lighting, or I don't know, the elementary school's Halloween parade. It's like little
Gavin
things
Fish,
like
hot on the
that.
scene.
Yeah,
Right.
it's like it's a hard hitting news,
Right,
right?
right.
But then every once in a while, something will happen. Like we've had some terrible crimes out here. One was a woman in her 70s that was out on a walk at a perfectly safe place in Oil City, Pennsylvania. She goes missing, and then her body is found the next day, having been assaulted and murdered.
Oh my God.
And I mean, it was a huge, huge murder case. Another one that was in our area, there was a little 2-year-old boy that, again, went missing.
Mm.
His body was found inside a canvas bag in the basement of the home that
Oh my
his
God.
mom and mom's boyfriend was living in that basement. Right, there have been some terrible crimes, and so those are stories that are important to cover. I mean, as a journalist, we are keeping a journal for history's sake. Not only are we reading it now, but for history's sake, we are keeping a journal of what is happening in our area. And so sometimes I get to go to the courthouse, and I mean, Western Pennsylvania, this is one of the original 13 colonies. This is as historical as they come, right? It's
Mhm.
very different than where I grew up in California, where everything is new. No, I'm
Right.
I'm in like a um, Civil War era courthouse with a giant clock tower and steeple, and
Yeah.
like you should see this courtroom.
Yeah.
It just comes straight out of history, and we sit in those courtrooms and we cover these cases and write about them for all of our neighbors to read the following day. It's I absolutely love it, especially going from being on scene outside the house where lights are police cars are and lights are flashing, to guilty verdict, gavel down. I love being able to cover all that.
That is sounds so exciting too. So you will, I mean, is it as much as you get a phone call, hey, there's been a report of a homicide out in such and such area. Can you roll out there and start to cover this story? How does that
We
land
have
on
a
your desk?
Slack channel. We have a Slack channel at EYT, and again, small community. I
Mhm.
I don't know how many people live in these three counties, but it does not reach 100,000 people for sure. There's
Mhm.
no way. And so I mean, sometimes I will get texts from people at different places. Sometimes one of my colleagues will put it out on Slack. Who's the closest?
Mhm.
run out there.
Wow.
That's how it is. It's
Wow.
it's a blast.
It
I love
sounds
it.
like honestly, it really does sound exciting. And so then you're interacting with law enforcement and talking to family members and trying to figure out what's going on. And then that's just kind of your case to follow it through the system as well.
Yeah. And again, like these are all little towns, right? So even the places that are called cities are towns. They're really small. So, I mean, I know the chief of police in every town in this county.
Hmm.
I mean, we our kids play together, and
Yeah.
you know, we go to the same social functions, and sometimes they live on my street. It's like it's that kind of thing. So, yeah, and people act professionally. It's not oh, what is the famous, like, Andy Griffith kind? It's not like that. It's not bumbling cops. We've got really good investigators out here.
Hmm.
They do really good work, but I know them, and so, I'm able to talk to them and get
That's
information.
fantastic.
It's fun. It's fun.
Yeah.
One of the things that I'm really kind of bummed out about is what I'm really working toward is doing YouTube full time. And I'm close. I mean, I think I could have done it in 2024. And I think by the end of 2025, I would be stupid not to just do YouTube full time.
Hmm.
But I love my day job so
Yeah.
much. It's just so interesting.
Yeah. No, it sounds like it. Because it's something new every day. Like you said, any job that you have where you don't know what the next phone call might bring, I think is a pretty exciting, especially if you have a passion for what's usually on the other end of that phone call. So
Yeah.
I can
Yeah.
understand why you have a hard time letting go. But let's get back to YouTube because it is becoming more and more successful for you, and it is becoming more and more of your weekly hours. And it's changed a little bit because you talked about how initially you were kind of scripting shows and producing them and putting out a video, but now it's much more or almost completely all live streaming, correct?
Almost exclusively.
Which is
Yeah.
a totally different animal in my view and in my experience too. It's one thing to sit down, have it scripted out, know what you want to show, know what you want to talk about, and just kind of present it to a video camera and then cut that all up and send it out to the universe and see what people think of it. It's another thing entirely to say, I'm live now. There's a couple hundred or a couple thousand people watching me, and they're interacting with me as I'm doing this. How has that experience been for you? How have you responded to it? Tell us about that.
Oh, I love it. So what happened with me is the Gabby Petito case happened.
Yeah.
And this was a case where the family was saying to social media, please help, right? It was the first time, at least since I had been doing it, that it wasn't a fight against law enforcement. It was law enforcement going, do you have anything for us? Give it to us,
Yeah.
right? So it was happening really fast. And I said to myself, there's no way that I can, like, if I start writing and editing everything at 6 in the morning, by 3 o'clock at night or in the afternoon, they've moved on
It's
to the
old.
next thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was doing sometimes 2 or 3 live streams a day
Wow.
while Gabby Petito was missing. And it was easy. I really liked it. I mean, I could still do the stuff that I liked, undercover or uncovering documents, or social media videos that have been posted, sightings and stuff like that. I could do that, but I could do it in real time. And being in front of, I know that people have fears, right? Everybody has a valid fear. And I know that public speaking is one of those that most people just really fear. I love it. There's nothing that bothers me about public speaking. I could be the the fear that I have is talking one on one with someone.
Right.
That's my biggest fear. I
Right.
don't I
Right.
don't like that. But if I can be on a stage and have 100,000 people looking at me, I'm perfectly comfortable and
Yeah.
never nervous.
Yeah.
So I was just like, why not do it this way?
Do you enjoy the interaction with people as they're asking questions and leaving
Yeah.
comments and
Yeah. And that's part of kind of the deal on mine. I have the live chat up. I can bring it into the screen. I'm always interacting with the people that are watching me.
tell us Do you have visions for the channel moving forward? Is there things that you want to add, things you have in the works, whatever you're willing to share with us, or cases that you're interested in that you're going to explore more of?
I think, generally speaking, I would like to have more guests,
Mhm.
experts. One of the early experts that I had on is a friend of mine who just happens to be like one of the world's best guys when it comes to DNA.
Mm.
He's a Penn State professor. He's a professor of genetics, genomics. Dr. Gruwell is his name. And I mean, I go to church with the guy and I was like, hey, Matt, I had this question about DNA. And it turns out that he was the guy, right? Oh, I love that so much. I've had former FBI agents on. I've had forensics people on. I have a friend who's a former medical examiner, uh, quadruple board certified forensic pathologist. And, I was just like, I knew that he was a doctor. I
Yeah.
didn't know anything,
Right, right.
so I like having more guests. There's a woman that I've had on a couple of times who specifically focuses on um, gender-based violence,
Oh, interesting.
right?
Mhm.
And she holds a master's degree in criminal justice, and she's focused on gender-based violence. Another guy is a strangulation expert. I I love having a library of people with really, really particular skills that can come on. So I'm hoping that the channel will have way more in terms of guests moving into the
That
future.
sounds fascinating. Sounds like a thrilling thing to add to all of it. How many cases do you have in the hopper? Like, how many are you kind of looking into at once to keep you occupied?
Oh man. I mean, well, I would divide that into two categories: the ones that I'm talking about publicly, and then the ones that I'm looking at
Right.
behind the
Right,
scenes.
right.
Uh, Early on, I actually put it on my website. Hey, if you just want me to take a look at a case, send it my way. And I don't know, 30 families took me up on that. And so I've still probably got a couple dozen cases that I work on pretty frequently.
Mhm.
Um, but as far as like presenting those, most of those people don't want that case presented. It's very hurtful to have it out there. So, I'm probably talking about 4 or 5 cases at a time.
So you're telling me you're working on cases and researching them for people with no intention of it ever seeing the light of day on your channel?
Hmm.
Oh,
Yeah, it's
wow.
fascinating. I love it.
Oh, wow. Oh, I applaud you for that. That's tremendous. I mean, and listen, not that I felt like you want to use everything for content, but I that is tremendous work to just be putting in for people. That's incredible. Has any of that have any of this stuff and research that you've done led to arrests or solving of things down the line?
I've had one conviction and one wrongful
That's
death
incredible.
suit
That's
that
incredible.
I mean, it's not just me, it's a team of people that are
Sure.
working on that. But I've had one conviction of a man that was accused of assaulting his brother sexually, that I was able to break his alibi, and
Wow.
and he actually pleaded guilty ultimately.
That is it's incredible. That is tremendous. To just from your seat in Western Pennsylvania, be able to reach out and bring some closure. I hate to use that word, but bring some comfort perhaps to some people's lives after so many years. Amazing.
Well, that's what Rick wanted to do from the beginning, right? When Rick talked to me about doing true crime, he's
Mhm.
like, maybe we can help solve crimes.
Right.
That's why we called it Solve Crimes with Rick and Gavin, right?
Right.
So I, that is the part that I really love. Ellen Greenberg, looping back to her, right? This is now in a place where we might see criminal prosecution.
Right.
And I mean, goodness, the Greenbergs deserve 99.9% of the credit. Their lawyers get a portion after that. Tom Brennan, the private investigator that for 12 years has done this pro bono, and then like 16 other people, and then I get a little piece of that there's some little thing. I mean, I got the case kicked out of Josh Shapiro's office. That
Yeah.
was my
Yeah.
contribution.
Yeah.
But we're going to start seeing over the next 1, 2, 3 years, I think we'll see criminal prosecution in Ellen's case.
That's incredible. That would be mind blowing to me. And I love to see it. Last kind of question on this is, have you noticed as the years go by, as YouTube online kind of sleuthing becomes more prevalent and perhaps acceptable and perhaps effective, do you think you've noticed a change, or do you think we will see a change from law enforcement, that they might be more kind of embracing of that just incredible network of people that they could have helping them? Or do you think that we're still going to deal with some skepticism for quite a bit of time?
This is a terrible answer. It's going to be a little bit of both.
Yeah.
There are people that are just really good detectives that have no training in being a detective. There are people that are just very good at it.
Yeah.
There are people that are very good at genetic genealogy. Just the very first part of getting that DNA mapped into a place where it can go into a database, that's the very beginning. I mean, it's a very important part, but then there are people that are genealogists that do the work of going back through history in a family tree and connecting people, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and there are people that are not law enforcement that have no training in it, but are very, very good at it. So, what I have found is that once a police officer comes to the belief that I am at least a fair detective and I'm not just some crazy wackadoo sitting in his old Victorian house in Western PA. Once they realize, he's a fair detective here, he's gotten a couple things, they then take me seriously.
That's great.
And I think that I might be just one of like tens of thousands. The problem is that if I could just give any advice to any home sleuth, you have to be able to differentiate between what is important and what is or less important, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be able to say to yourself, I'm going to just set this thing aside that is, I mean, it piques my interest and it's a little bit strange, but I don't think it's as important as this other thing that I've uncovered.
Mm-hmm.
Because so many home sleuths do get caught on just the minutiae, the nothing,
the bizarreness, the strangeness, the fantastic. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. There's one in the Ellen Greenberg case, and I love these people to death, these home sleuths that are working on it. But there's a part of the Ellen Greenberg case that I'm just going, guys, move on.
Mm-hmm.
Like we would have to get through 1,200 more steps before that became important.
Mm-hmm.
Please,
right.
Turn your attention over here. So, as long as there are people that are kind of like hyper focused on the things that don't matter, and that is, I think, where law enforcement training comes in. I think that's what they're trained to be able to triage what is important in their investigation.
Yeah.
And a lot of us we just can't let go of the little things.
Right. Wow. Gavin, I got to tell you, this has been really a pleasure for me and enjoyable to hear your story and the journey you've taken and just all the incredible work that you're doing. I applaud you. It's commendable. I wish you nothing but the best and future success. But thank you again for taking the time. Before I let you go, people can find you on YouTube at Gavin Fish. Is there any other place that you would like to direct them towards?
Yeah, you can find me everywhere. If you go to gavinfish.com, that's my website. If you are a home sleuth, a burgeoning home sleuth, and you just want a treasure trove of documents to start going through, I've got about 18,000 pages of documents on different cases on the website. And I'm not exaggerating. I think that's about where I am, about 18,000 pages. So check it out. Check me out on YouTube. Yeah, and it's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me on.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you again, my friend. Take care. We hope you enjoyed this interview. If there is someone you would like to hear from, a well-known creator or perhaps someone you feel that gets overlooked, please let us know in the comments. And please check out our playlist of past conversations. We appreciate you all. Please remember to like this episode and subscribe for more content like this. Thank you again for joining us for this episode of Courtroom Confidential Conversations.